Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners Policy Session on October 8, 2024. Gary Schmidt, would you please take the roll?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Commissioner Savas.
Present.
Commissioner Schrader.
Here.
Commissioner West.
Here.
Commissioner Shull.
Here.
Chair Smith.
Here.
Thank you. All commissioners are present. We're flipping the order today. We're starting with the policy session, and that is Development Ready Land Strategy. Dan Johnson, Director of Transportation and Development, will present. Go ahead, Dan.
On September 4th of this year, the chair suggested initiating a development-ready land study. The board discussed potential components of that study and requested that staff return and give you kind of a concept for next steps, which we're here today to present. Through a study of this nature, staff is assuming that you could examine both the rural zone lands within the UGB and lands within the urban reserves. And this information could essentially build on the information that we have to date, analyzing capacity and including an evaluation of feasibility and cost to serve areas with urban infrastructure, including utilities. There's a couple of considerations when you look at a study, and I really want to highlight the fact that this is an information gathering exercise primarily, just to better understand the lands that we have in these particular areas. But there's some considerations when you do a deeper dive into these discussions. One is that city coordination is key. Cities hold the key to unlocking the land potential within Clackamas County. Most of these areas that we're discussing abut cities. Their partnership in the process and agreement on mutual goals is vital to its success. Our partners at Metro. Metro is in charge of assessing growth trends within the regional UGB. Essentially, this regional analysis has not only reflected the needs of our individual jurisdictions, so basically this study could help educate our regional partners about what needs the county has more specifically, instead of taking a regional assessment, looking at Clackamas County specifically and what our needs are for meeting our employment, land, and or our housing needs that we may have. Housing, there's new requirements for individual jurisdictions, including Clackamas County, to complete housing assessments on land capacity and development strategies to meet local housing needs. We haven't updated you on that yet. We will be providing a policy session and an update on that here in the near future, but essentially this is the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis. The methodology is being assessed right now, and that is where the state is going to look to the county to provide a certain number of residential units within our unincorporated areas. Staff are looking at that methodology and providing comments on that as we speak to true that up. Economic development and job readiness. Essentially, we have some partnering work that's going on through our Office of Economic Development. That work is essentially a draft economic landscape analysis. We'll be preparing to share that with the board here in the near future. It's a deeper dive into what those various sectors are within Clackamas County. Which ones are growing and succeeding, which ones are struggling, and that we may want to provide more additional support to. We are also looking to build on that analysis, essentially doing defining a set of necessary land characteristics to meet the needs of those sectors. And the hope is that you can merge this data when we do a deeper dive into the lands that we have within our rural UGB areas and our urban reserves, and look at what those lands are and will they meet the needs of the sectors that we have now or that we want to gain in the future. And that will help educate the discussion. Next steps, essentially with the board direction to proceed, staff would engage our city partners to develop a refined study scope. This would be including defining a problem statement, key questions, desired outcomes, and a timeline for completion. We would also assess a variety of funding options. We're aware of some now, and we think we will be more competitive once we get a scope developed and can bring that back for board consideration. So there are three options before you today. Basically, option one is to proceed with the next steps identified within the document before you. Second is to address issues you may raise today that we can expand our scope to address. Last is to delay this assessment at this point in time. Staff's recommendation is to direct staff to proceed with the aforementioned next steps to develop a study proposal for consideration by the board. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions or comments from commissioners? Paul?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Mark, I didn't see your light.
So as last time we discussed this, I wanted to make sure that, and I think you are, Dan, so I'm not questioning the proposal here, but I do want to emphasize that we're looking at you know, the entire county available lands. We're not focusing on a area. And, but what I have is two recent conversations that stick out to me right now. One was the Joint Committee on Transportation Roundtable in Clackamas, and also the West Side Economic Alliance discussion last week. And, you know, there's a lot of other discussions that are happening, but the theme here is that the one last week with the WEA was about, geez, you know, Metro only had one city apply for an urban growth boundary expansion. And in that discussion, just listening in for the Washington County folks, disappointment that that was the only one that would applied, and, you know, there's not enough industrial land, and, you know, that whole balance, right? But not a whole lot of discussion, some, on the infrastructure needs. And I think the other conversation with the Joint Committee on Transportation, and both at the Clackamas and also in Hillsborough in Washington County, the issue is that as a commute shed grows, right, this deficient transportation system that we currently have, infrastructure, you know, it seems to be propagated by, you know, we're not going to grow, and or we're not going to need cars, or whatever those are, is put us in a position where we are woefully deficient on transportation systems. And when the commute shed grows outside of our county into other counties as far south as, you know, I won't say Eugene, but even Eugene, but Marion County, Salem, and east, west, north, Clark County, we don't have the infrastructure, yet we have the people coming to work in this area. And so I just want to emphasize that I want to make sure we look at the entire county, that we have cities, and we bring help find a way to bring resources to the cities if they don't have the staffing to help make this happen, right? Which I think is part of that department's work. But you know, with the mandates, what's changed from the last time we did a land use study is this legislative directed effort to build housing, and not much money to back up the infrastructure side of it, which is where, again, I want to focus on that, on the infrastructure side. So I support that in light of those things, but again, my emphasis is, and you know, the Sunrise Corridor, the work we're doing there, what we've identified, it's prime. There's a substantial amount of lands that are already in the UGB. So that seems to be a prime opportunity to fold infrastructure into that, and what can we do to help our partners in the area. So in that broad county-wide look, I support an effort that takes all that into consideration.
Thank you for bringing that up, because that's an important point of emphasis. It is a county-wide assessment, and I'll use the example that you shared there. Yeah, the whole Sunrise Corridor, there are areas that are in the UGB, but there are areas that are outside the Happy Valley's area of interest right now. And so this is an informational assessment of those areas on what the pros and the cons are for looking at that. There's also urban reserves out past that area. And doing a deeper dive into those areas and those lands to really inform a discussion around what next steps might be.
Yeah. And, you know, I'll just close with this, and that is that it's encouraging, at least, that, you know, we have at least, I mean, more than one city, but in this case, the Sunrise Corridor, we have a city, Happy Valley, who's well-staffed, and their mindset, you know, is to take these challenges on and grow and meet those needs in all spectrums, commercial, residential, and industrial. So we have a willing partner, so to speak, in this effort, and we just need to make sure that the state helps us on the infrastructure side.
Well noted. Commissioner Shaw.
Yes, good morning, Dan. So my question was a little bit like Commissioner Savis's, and that is, as you look at this study, are you going to concentrate on lands that surround or just are outside of the current city UGBs and the metro UGBs, or are you going to look at areas in the county that, if developed, and I understand that there's Oregon land use challenges, but if they were developed, would be potential areas that we could develop? Of course, the other thing is the question about system development and readiness of the lands. If the lands cannot be ready for development for decades. It's not really as much of an interest to us. The other thing too is that to find lands that are suitable for industry and employment lands where the slope is less than 7%, the potential time frame for being ready for development is short, as in just a couple years maybe, as opposed to decades. And also, size of lands, we're in critical need of 20 acre, 50 acre, and 100 acre or thereabouts employment lands. So those things I hope you would be looking at. The other thing too is that when we look at the potential for expansion of the city UGBs, we know what happened this last spring when the governor asked the cities of Oregon, do you want to take a look at expanding your UGBs? There wasn't a lot of takers. I think Sherwood might have been the only city that wanted to expand. So anyway, those are some challenges to this. Hopefully, at the end of the study, we'll come up with something that we can actually sink our teeth into and use to expand into in the short term to provide those homes we need and the potential for attracting new business. One other quick thing on that. The catalog we got on Oregon counties here just a couple days ago, staff handed them out, had a breakdown on statistics on all Oregon counties. I found it interesting that Clackamas County has got the highest average income of any county in the state,
Yep.
even ahead of Multnomah County
It is.
and Washington County. But that is not all good news. And what I mean by that is we have a situation where we have the highest average income of any county in the state, yet we also have people who are most pressed for being able to get into a home in Clackamas County. They're most pressed also to find the employment lands they need. Okay? So we cannot be lulled into the feeling that everything's just fine when it's not. So anyway, this study that you propose undertaking is very critical. I'm hoping that the result will be actionable things we can actually get going on.
A lot of that discussion that you're having, especially about the interest from some of these cities in participating in the UGB expansion, is a lack of information. And so the hope is that this study will help educate our partners that are out there on what is viable and what is feasible, what the return on the investment may be, the benefits to their communities. And that's a big lift for the county to do that, but it's a way that we can partner with them and have a more honest discussion around the knowns around our land and what it is. I mean, I've been here too long, but harken back to the discussion around the Damascus expansion out there. You had a lot of individuals making decisions around boundary locations on two-dimensional maps, not from a three-dimensional perspective. And so we're trying to bring those other dimensions into this discussion. It's easy to look down on a piece of paper and say, yeah, that's a good road down there to end it at. But if you don't have a three-dimensional discussion around the topography, about availability, infrastructure costs, and all that, and that's why that decision fundamentally changed the way that these expansions have gone forward since then. Rightfully so, they should. And this is information that will hopefully provide and educate all of our partners around possibilities. So.
Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, but I really, I think this is a great idea to take a look at this. But what I noted here, that you have an economic landscape analysis, and it's in draft form. When will we be able to take a look at that and see?
We just got it back.
Okay.
Staff is just looking at the draft right now, and we'll be
Okay.
bringing it forward for consideration here at the Board of County Commissioners shortly.
Okay, thank you.
This is interesting. You know, you mentioned how important the cities are. Does Clackamas County have the same level of value as Metro and the cities
Most definitely.
in developing our lands that are outside city boundaries, okay? And I think we need to remember that. And oftentimes, I think we capitulate to the city as, oh, they don't want to do this because of this agreement or that agreement. We need to be open-minded, and there are many partners out there right now. I've been talking to anybody who has anything in Clackamas County, and I think you're going to see some legislative efforts on this as well. And so I think this is very timely. How long will it take for the results to come back?
Oh.
You know,
That depends.
Dan, it's one thing for us to say we're
Yeah.
doing it, but if we don't have any rubber to the road.
Yeah.
Oh, we can't do anything because we're waiting for a study. That sounds so government-ish.
No, I mean, I think that depends on what that scope is that finally gets developed. I think we have a pretty good idea, and we've kind of developed a preliminary scope for consideration. We know there's an interest in moving this forward as quickly as possible. And
Give me
there's,
some timeline.
huh?
Can you give me a timeline?
Right now, I cannot. I
Okay.
can report back to the board once we have more information on a timeline.
Yes, and let's kind of like get that going,
Yep.
okay?
Yep.
I was in a meeting with some regional leaders talking about home development and so forth. And evidently, the governor had made a statement that we have enough infrastructure in place. We have enough, according to the governor. And again, I don't think there's an understanding there. Now, she may be looking at it through a lens of homeless housing or affordable housing when we want to do infill and have no parking, and we're hooking up to somebody else's sewer. But I think for the overall picture, I think an education on the governor's part is in order with this. I was very disheartened by that because I've had conversations with her about infrastructure. The last legislature did allocate monies to infrastructure, correct? They did. What's happening with that? I mean, I think it's probably the expansion of the city's infrastructure. I don't know if Clackamas County's taking advantage of that or not. You know, I'd like to see an update on what efforts have been made with the allocation from the legislature in the last long session on the infrastructure needs in Oregon, and whether Clackamas County is a beneficiary of that. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, speaking of the cities, what's going to be our strategy if a city is not willing to, they don't want to have us partner look at it? And, I just want to understand, I don't want this to be perceived as though we're pushing them. I'm sure, I know that's not your intention, but I don't want the perception. So therefore, I think we ought to be mindful of the growth, non-growth type things that we typically have, or even areas or pockets of areas where maybe they're willing, but maybe not over here, but over there, right? So, thoughts?
Well, I'm hoping, we've done kind of a preliminary outreach, kind of think about how that might work and what might happen. And that's why you see the framing of this discussion around, it's information. That's all it is. And these entities will have the ability to kind of understand what and how and if they want to act on that. That does not mean that I think the project needs to be held hostage by a particular city because there's mutual benefit. These are lands within Clackamas County that are planned to go into possibly into cities. And again, we're just looking to information. We're gaining information around that. This is not a planning effort that we are leading, that we're dropping a gavel on. That is not the exercise. It is basically a thoughtful assessment of lands, a thoughtful assessment of infrastructure costs associated with it, to better understand the properties that we have. You've got, harken back to the discussion we had about the UGB decision. You guys just submitted a letter to the Metro, and Commissioner Sol's been holding that discussion with those folks about the fact their perception is we have enough industrial land for the next 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
And why is that? That's because their assumption on how they categorize viable industrial land, we have concerns with that. And your letter basically asked that a task force get developed. But if those assumptions, if there are regional assumptions out there that are being based off methodology that we don't agree with or isn't really feasible, we want the ability to, one, challenge that methodology, and then two, educate these regional entities around what our lands are really like. Because that assessment then leads into a discussion on the possible necessity to add additional lands that do meet a more developable criteria. which is good information. That's good information to have in our back pocket.
Yep. One other thing I want to follow on is if the governor feels, I think it was Chair Smith that mentioned it, but the governor feels that there's not a need for infrastructure or disconnect, or we gave you all money. It was small amount of money. I mean, so it doesn't go very far. I'll just use water. Well, both water and transportation, they're all expensive, but, if you're a small city and you need to, you don't add a small amount, you add increments, and those increments take engineering and a lot of money. And it's not uncommon for an increment of potable water to cost you, a lot of money, tens of millions of dollars. And that's a lot to bear for a small city, or even a large city for that matter. So, when you give out $1 million or $2 million of infrastructure money, that's a paltry sum compared to the actual lift, let alone transportation. But, I think where we are, and I think our legislators need to wake up to this, but because transportation is not at the forefront on anyone's focus for this next session, and that is that, at least in this region, this mindset that we don't need cars are going to go away, we're going to provide transit, and we're going to have this smart growth model, high density and transit everywhere. Well, that might work in areas that are flat, that have it today, but the political winds, we're not getting it, we're not seeing it, it's not happening. And the advent of electric cars and now hydrogen cars that are already on board in the state of California, which are going to be moving up here as well. I think the single occupancy vehicles, the SOVs, is alive and well, and that need for the transportation infrastructure, I'm sorry, but it's still on the table, and it still needs to be addressed, and that's part of the infrastructure solution as well. But developers aren't going to throw a lot of money if there's a 1 hour backup or 2 hour backup to get to a small little subdivision, right, on the way to work or on the way home. So that's the reality, and we're stretched to the limit right now.
We are. Thank you. Commissioner West?
Good morning, Dan.
Good morning.
I guess I'm trying to, it's a pretty big endeavor. I'm trying to understand kind of the big why we go through this big endeavor to do this localized land assessment. Then we have this data, and we can't do much of it on our own. We are somewhat beholden to the land use laws and the state and Metro and other partners. So once we have this booklet or this data done, these pages, what is the, what's the big use for it beyond we have information? Is it, we put out an expenditure, your staff goes out and does a lot of hard work, we get good information. I'm just curious, what's the purpose?
Information is power. So when you're talking to these regional bodies about the fact that they're making an assumption on X amount of available lands for us to develop now and in the future, and we're able to articulate to them that their methodology is wrong and the viability to develop those lands is less than what they are assuming, we are able to articulate a need to expand and to grow and to develop. And that is the value of the information. It also allows more local regional understanding for the lands that we have, to engage in discussions with our cities about opportunities they have there, and benefits from growth in certain areas. There's perceptions about, I don't want to get into specifics, but there are perceptions about certain areas and the pros and cons associated with them being in certain areas or certain areas to the east, and viability for sewer. I mean, Commissioner Savas is very familiar with this with the Sunrise discussion. It's like, what happens to that area to the east in the storm or the sanitary sewer? Does it got to be put to Gresham? Let's put pen to paper and figure that out. Because if that's the case and you don't have a willing partner over there, I can appreciate the fact that your map shows that we have this pretty area over here, but if it's not viable for development, we need to find some lands that are.
Do you think that data will be received by our partners where there's often friction? Do you think that this data will be utilized in a way that could be productive about the advancement around the use of our lands?
So I think that the ability to receive the data is based on the ability to develop common objectives and common goals. I think if we were to do this in a vacuum and just spit this data out without having a dialogue before the development of that scope, you could see individuals possibly refuting that information. I mean, some, not all of it's logical in regards to like topography and limitations, natural features, things like that, that we all know are limited. But I think that's the importance of getting a mutual scope developed around what our objectives are, because that limits the ability to refute the information presented at hand.
I do agree with that. And just to piggyback a little bit on what Commissioner Scholl said about, demographically, we are the highest income county in the state. And I have been in meetings with leaders in the legislature that have said, well, Clackamas County is wealthy, so you don't necessarily need it like this other county does. And so just recently, and this was regarding deflection funding, and I know you guys don't like the algorithm, but I mean, you guys do have Lake Oswego, so you have lots of money. And that was what the senator said to me. Like, I mean, my jaw hit the floor as if like they haven't been in other parts of the county that are quite economically depressed, and as if like fentanyl or drug addictions like care about what your socioeconomic status is as they ravage our communities. But I don't want to get off on that tangent. But I do think that having quality data that is evidence-based and well done is an ability to kind of like take those moments and say, yeah, I mean, but this is what the data actually says is necessary, and those it allows you to have something solid to move forward. How long is a study like this good for? So much has changed, even in every 4 years during an election cycle. Like what? How long does this even? How do we update data and studies? How long do we rely on the work that you're doing?
So there's two components to the study. Fundamentally, the study of the land is the study of the land. That's not going to change. What may change is there may be an escalator or a CPI multiplier on the infrastructure costs associated with
Okay.
it. And that's where, and that's not rocket science. There can be an adjustment of present value of money, future value of money that can be looking at that. I want to go back to the statement. It's funny because I'm not sure which of you or Gary, whoever coined the phrase that no county is like any other county or something like that.
If you've seen one
Yeah.
county, you've
Seen them
one.
all. Yeah. That's not the key. I mean, the assertion from that particular individual on the fact that Clackamas County is wealthy is an interesting one because, again, they haven't seen the less affluent, struggling areas of Clackamas County. And then secondly, we don't have the tools like other counties do. We've had this talk about transportation. You have adjoining counties that are getting $50 million more a year than we are to fund transportation improvements. So that funding game is not one-to-one for all these entities. And so I think that's part of that discussion that Commissioner Savas hit on regarding the infrastructure. I mean, not every county is every county. Not every county has the tools. Legally, we can't get those tools anymore. And I'm not complaining. I mean, if I was that county, I'd love that stuff. But fundamentally, we need other tools in our tool bin to help with our development. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. And are we seeing any other? We're having to kind of go out on our own a little bit. Like we're not getting resolution on chronic and persistent issues around infrastructure, land use, transportation, all of those things how they intersect. So we're kind of having to chart our own course. It seems like a little bit here. Are any other counties feeling like they are having to engage and bring forth this data that represents their needs?
We haven't heard a lot of discussion from our friends at Multnomah County because their roles are different, with the city being there and taking more of a responsibility. We're having discussions with our neighbors over at Washington County, and it's more of I think they are all interested in data. It's just how are they going forward and getting that data? I think some entities have, for example, cities that are being more proactive and they're going out and doing an analysis of this areas and feeding that information back to the county. There's just different ways to, deal with this particular topic, and they differ jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick statement here. I think one of the key things that we do for our businesses, and this is kind of the rule of thumb, Dan, that I think I've worked with you guys for a long time. First, it's retention, then it's expansion, and then finally, it's recruitment. And one of the values of combining this with an economic analysis of our business community, what we have here, who needs to grow, who wants to grow. And then there's the theory of clusters that You know, one of the things we found out, we have a lot of medical manufacturing in this county. So then you can actually start not only helping the ones that are already here expand, but also see that as a sector that you can evaluate, for instance, what a medical manufacturer would use and how you would tie that to the land. And to me, that's the biggest value of this, because it gives us an opportunity to go out to folks when they're coming in and looking for expansion and/or recruitment and have shovel-ready land. So that's pretty much the theme that we've worked on for years here, and that's why I'm glad we're doing this again.
You're going to love
Yeah.
the economic landscape plan, because essentially what it does is it has a matrix that shows what sectors are succeeding. So that's basically your retention strategy
Right.
around those components, and what areas either aren't or are trying to grow, and then those are our new investment areas.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Thank you, commissioners, for all your good comments. I think we're ready for a motion. Shoal?
Okay. In regards to this presentation on development-ready land strategy, I move that we direct staff to proceed with the aforementioned next steps to develop a study proposal for the consideration by the board.
Second.
Commissioner Shoal has moved option 1, which is direct staff to proceed with the aforementioned next steps to develop a study proposal for consideration by the board, and Commissioner Schrader has seconded that motion. Any further discussion?
I just want to just add
Yes.
one thing to this income thing, and I think we need to work on that. Especially when the state legislature, if they're ones mentioning that, Ben, and that is that, and we'll say, well, congratulations, because you, the state, get the income tax from all those high earners, not us.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're the recipients of that wealth,
Yeah.
right? And I think we need to reframe and reframe the discussion to say, why don't we just do an assessed value income for the governments? And Portland, for example, they have a huge tax base, right? The revenue. So we put it in our perspective and reframe that discussion to say, geez, how much industrial land does Clackamas County have to Washington County, right? Or to Multnomah County. So that's the revenue we live off of. So the county isn't rich in comparison to those others. We're the poorer of the 3 counties, right? So we need to reframe that discussion, and maybe our staff can help us with the numbers on that. And I want to give one other example why infrastructure is so important. And I know Commissioner West understands this, but that connector between Tualatin and Wilsonville, the 124th, okay? They had the money through that MSTIP
Yeah.
to build that road. And they built the road and the businesses came, and that area is exploding.
Yep.
Right?
It is.
Just proof that if you put the infrastructure, you front the infrastructure, what will happen? And we don't have that. So those revenue streams, if you put it out there, that's another form of wealth that Washington County has that we don't have.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Totally right.
Okay, thank you, commissioners, for a very good conversation. Commissioner West, please.
Nope, go ahead. Nope,
Okay.
we're moving forward. It's not a big.
I'm going to call for the vote.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, commissioners, very much. I'd like to let you know that Commissioner Schrader has to leave at 10:45 because she has a very important duty to perform.
I'll be introducing our senator from Washington, D.C., and I'm looking forward to it with Senator Meek, and I are going to be there with Senator Wyden at Camp Thickham. So, okay.
And she'll have to leave soon, so that's why we moved up this session. So to accommodate commissioners and do this very important policy session. Thank you. Gary, what's next?
All right, we're now moving to the issues list for today. There was a consent request for North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District that is pulled until next week. So the Board of Commissioners will meet the rest of this agenda. Next is request for consent agenda for the Board of Commissioners. First, Finance. Item 1, approval of a sublease agreement for Justice Court parking lot spaces with American Property Management. Total agreement value is $2,716.80 for 2 years. Funding is through Justice Court fees and fines. No county general funds are involved. Elizabeth Comfort, Finance Director. Jeff Jorgensen, Facilities Division Director. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I do have Jeff with me, just to let you know, he negotiates all of our county leases, and so I have him here as our lease expert today. This lease before you is to request approval for a 2-year contract with the Clackamas Town Center Mall. I've been coming before you every year for 4 years for 1-year leases, and the Town Center has requested that we have a 2-year lease this time. These are for 5 additional spaces for court staff to park. The Town Center is very strict on their parking, and so we want to make sure that their cars are not towed. We do have 24 spaces for our court system there, and so we want to keep those available for our visitors that come to the court. So this is in addition to our regular spaces.
Questions or comments on this? The town center wanted a 2-year lease. Is that lease paid yearly,
It's,
or are they upfronting it?
it's paid separately in 2 different years, but it's a 2-year
Every year,
lease.
it's paid every year, even though we're moving from a yearly lease to a 2-year lease, it's still being paid yearly.
Yes.
Thank you. I see no objections, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next, Juvenile Department. Item 1, approval of a personal services contract with the Pathfinder Network for Cognitive Behavioral Skills Group. Total agreement value is $274,832 for 3 years. Funding is through the Oregon Youth Authority and the U.S. Department of Justice grants. No county general funds are involved. Christina McMahon, Director of Juvenile, go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Smith, Commissioners. I am here to ask you to agree to put this matter on the consent agenda for the business meeting. We have developed a really great working relationship with the Pathfinder Network, and they are able to offer the various cognitive, behavioral, and skills groups that we need to address the risk factors that we see with the young people who are involved in our department. So we want to continue this and ask that you put it on the consent agenda. As Gary already stated, there are no county general funds involved in this. We're able to use the federal and state funding sources to pay for this service to the young people.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
Thank you, and that is it. That's the request for consent, 2 items. Next, Regional Waste Advisory Committee nominations. Dan Johnson and Cheryl Bell from Transportation and Development. Go ahead.
Doesn't this work if one person's gone and they get volunteered for this? I just want to plant that seed right now.
Can't tell you about that, Don.
Hey, Chair Smith and Commissioners, thanks so much for the time again. I'm joined by Cheryl Bell, our Assistant Director of Development for DTD. And we're here to talk or share some information with you regarding the Regional Waste Advisory Committee. This RWAC, as you may have heard, you've been aware of this committee for a while. Historically, this committee was built was regional experts that were brought together from various entities that were part of this advisory group. Metro is looking to repurpose this RWAC entity and essentially are asking us if we would like to have an elected official participate in it. So essentially, the updated 17-member committee will include representatives from local governments, industry, and the community. This includes 5 positions designated for elected officials representing the cities and the counties, 2 Metro councilors, and to serve on the committee as a chair and vice chair. Local government seats are for 2 years. The term is currently 2 years. The time commitment is essentially 2-hour meetings every month with associated preparation time. So if you our discussions regarding RWAC usually come to your attention either one, when we report from Commissioner Scholl and his MPAC role trying to get more information from the regional waste discussion to go through MPAC, and what at Metro is and the second is when we come and talk to you about rates. It's the rate discussion we have every year about hauler and distribution and cost and tip rates. So essentially, I think this is a good thing. We have been asking for more elected representation on these groups because you are the ones that are close to our community that are having the impacts and the fees to pay these fees that this entity is setting up. So essentially, we have the application materials in here. We thought this was an important topic to bring forward because you have expressed interest in this in the past. And if there's a member of the board that would like to participate and be represented from Clackamas County, staff stands that they're ready to help you fill out the necessary paperwork and submit. All the submittals will be reviewed by Metro Chair and appointed by the council at a later date. I guess for sake of discussion, I want to make sure that, so essentially what I'm hearing is that this new RWAC advisory group would look similar to kind of the MPAC model. It'd be a partnering model like that, where we're running transportation through JPAC, and then you run all the land use components through MPAC. This RWAC would work in kind of a very similar model to those other advisory boards that are currently staffed. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
It's interesting to me what Metro is doing on many of these committees. We have this, we also have a movement with the SHS dollars to do HPAC, the housing group of people coming down the pike. If the governance model change is going to happen, I don't know where that is yet. Jan, do you want us to pick a designee today, or what are you exactly asking for?
If there is a representative from this board that would like to be a part of that, I'd love to know that sooner rather than later. We'd like to get that
When is the
information.
first meeting?
We're not sure when the first meeting is. We know that the nominations for these 5 positions that are be held by cities and counties are open until filled. And so they are accepting applications till they've seated the 5 members.
So you get one from each of the tri-counties and one elected from each county?
They haven't designated exactly what the seats are. They just say for cities and counties. So that's why I wanted to bring this to you sooner rather than later so we could get our application in.
So they could have 2 city members essentially and no county member. Is that what you're saying?
We're not sure what the structure is since it's up to Metro.
They could
They
have.
could in theory,
yeah.
Thank
yes.
Yeah.
That's why time is of the essence, is what you're
Yeah.
telling me. I'm trying to read between the lines of what you're saying. Thank you. Help me along here. Okay. Now, commissioners, what do you want to do? I am not interested in serving on this because potentially I will be serving on HPAC. And that's a very heavy lift, very heavy lift. Martha's not here today. I don't know if she's going to be interested in it. But commissioners, is there anybody else who wants yet another meeting in their very busy schedule with, I assume, a lot of reading and work ahead of time? I think we need to bring it back, and I think we need to let this soak in because this is the first, really, that we've had a consideration. Savas, you're up.
Well, I just say I'd support any of my colleagues wanting to do it. I just got assigned to 2 committees, so I'm
I know.
a little overwhelmed, so I'm not jumping in on this one, but I would happily support, as wacky as this may be, I want to use that acronym. I think it's important. I think the sooner we get someone appointed to it and we let them know that we're ready to go, I think to Commissioner Smith's concern about, us being, pushed out or indirectly pushed out, I think the better off we are. So I'm looking at one of you 3.
Dan, does it have to be an elected from the county?
The position is identified as elected
It
position.
has to be an elected. Can we bring this back next week at Issues?
Yes.
And let's let the commissioners think about it. Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Ruminate, take a look at our schedules, unless, Shoal, you're thinking over there.
Well, what a rare thing. Here's the deal. Somebody's got to step up, okay? In January, the board reshuffles liaison assignments. So why don't we just go ahead and I'll volunteer to do this and cover down whatever might come up on this. And then in January, we'll see how the board is configured, and then we can readjust.
I want to make crystal clear that staff is here to help whoever represents Clackamas County on this board, staff them up regarding the topics, talking points, briefings, et cetera. So,
Commissioner West.
Can you reiterate, when do they hold these meetings again?
We don't know the actual date. It's monthly meetings. It's a monthly 2-hour meeting.
We don't know if it's morning, evenings, Mondays, Friday. We don't know any of that.
I would guess they're probably going to be in the afternoon, because most jurisdictions meet in the morning. And are they in person or virtual or a combination? Because travel time is an issue for us. We have 2 hours travel time.
yeah. I would assume, as with other Metro meetings, there's options that are available.
Okay. Commissioner Shoal,
Yes.
are you willing to do that? Commissioner
Well,
West?
somebody needs to do it. I think I would be happy to do it. Like I said, if anything comes up between now and January 1st, I'll take care of it, and then we'll just
Right.
see where we're at come 1 January.
Commissioner West, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve Commissioner Scholl to serve on the, I just had it in front of me. The WAC committee, so WAC, the WAC committee with Metro.
I second.
Commissioner West has moved for the nomination of Commissioner Scholl to serve on Metro's Regional Waste Advisory Committee. Commissioner Savas has seconded the motion. Thank you for stepping up, Commissioner Scholl. Any further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the poll?
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next advisory board and commission appointments. Andrew, go ahead, please.
Chair, the Budget Committee, staffed by Finance, currently has one opening due to a term expiration of an incumbent member. The 5 total appointed members serve terms of 3 years each. Recruitment opened to the public on the 3rd of April 2024 and closed June 24th, 2024. The incumbent member is recommended for reappointment of the 9 new applicants that were received and the 1 current member who also applied. The recommendation is Jan Lee for a 3rd term ending June 30th, 2027. Chair Smith.
I'll
Chair-
entertain a motion. Go ahead.
Chair, I move that we approve Jan Lee for her third term, to the Board of Commissioners Budget. Hold on, I'm getting to the Budget Committee.
Thank you.
Second.
Commissioner West has moved the appointment of Jan Lee through the Budget Committee, and Commissioner Savas has seconded the motion. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the poll?
Commissioner Scholl.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Chair, the second advisory board or commission for you to consider today is the Clackamas Workforce Partnership, which is notifying the Board of County Commissioners of 3 changes to the Clackamas Workforce Partnership Board of Directors. 25 members are allowed and serve a maximum of 3 3-year terms. The current 3 openings are due to the end of term for a county employee who served the remainder of a term as an economic development representative, the reapplication for a 2nd term by a labor representative, and a midterm resignation of another distinct labor representative whose replacement at this point is being nominated to fulfill a 1st new term. The following have been appointed: James Graham for 1st term, Vanessa Stewart for her 2nd, and Sinai Hennessy to finish Paul Diaz's term and begin a 1st term.
Discussion. I'll entertain a motion.
So, actually, I do have a question. Is the terminology correct? I mean, it says they've been appointed.
Yeah,
Aren't we the appointing board? They've been nominated? Just, Gary? can you-
No, so they're technically, the Clackamas Workforce Board can appoint their own because of their unique federal board. So you're affirming their appointments.
Okay, so we're affirming.
You're affirming their appointments. Yes.
Why do we have to?
It's a federal law. They're the federal workforce board you've delegated to.
How would you word that in a motion then?
Just approve the 3 people, please.
Just approve the, okay.
I move to affirm James Graham, Vanessa Stewart, and Sinai Hennessy to the Workforce Board.
Seconded.
Commissioner Savas has moved that we appoint to the Clackamas Workforce Partnership, we affirm the appointments of the Clackamas Workforce Partnership of James Graham, Vanessa Stewart, and Sinai Hennessy, and Commissioner Shaw second that. Further discussion? Would the clerk please take the poll?
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Up next, Gary.
Next, your board business meeting agenda review for this Thursday, October 10, 2024, 10 a.m. You'll have 3 consent agenda items in your normal course of business. That's it. If you have any questions, please let me know. The last item today, Chair, is Commissioner Communications.
Commissioner Savas, you're up first.
Still thinking about this. I am tired of this claim that we're the wealthiest county, and I'm just kind of still reeling about that thought. Again, for the state legislature, Commissioner West, or a state legislator to point that out when they're the recipient of those dollars and we're not. I think there's a number of examples we could use. I named some of them, but the more I think about it, I think we have a really strong argument, frankly, whether it's on the infrastructure front, whether it's on, transit, I mean, just a number of things. So I just hope that staff can actually do some field work on that and figure out how we talk about that fact and bring our assessed value into that. If you look at the assessed value, we definitely are the smallest income of the 3 counties. So I don't know, maybe it was clever of someone to point us out that we had the highest income levels, but on the other hand, if the opposite is somewhat really true, when someone says the county, and we are the county, our income stream isn't any close to those other two counties.
Well, I think we need to make a differentiation between the incomes of people and our ability to do government services with that. We basically have a property tax, and that's it. And we don't tax income off of our people in the county. Like Multnomah and maybe some other counties. So I think it's very disingenuous the statistic that I would like to see, if that could be quantified by the amount of income tax that's collected in Clackamas County compared to Multnomah and Washington County. And that's how we dispute the fact that we're the richest county. And that's data that is powerful for us. So, I don't know, Gary, I don't know if that's worth it or not, but Ben, you're up.
It was a Democrat that is not a random Democrat. It was not just a random legislator out of the 90. I will not be more specific than that, but it was somebody of notoriety, I'll say that. I just caught me off guard specifically regarding the topic around the substance abuse disorder that is just ravaging the entire metro area. When we were talking about the appropriate and correct way to maybe allocate funding. But there is a narrative, I think, out of Multnomah County legislators specifically, where they just see us kind of as the white, suburban, rich peoples. And so it creates there's a worldview behind that informs how they want to divvy resources up. And so they really start to look at like class or immutable traits on how they do this instead of like getting problems solved and getting resources where they need to go and helping communities across the entire state. And you start to pit one part of the state or urban area against another, and it's just not healthy. We see this on a larger scale. I was just in Eastern Oregon all weekend. We were on the family hunting trip, and you can feel the difference between a large portion of the state that feels completely disenfranchised from the other part of the state, and they feel like that one part of the state has disdain for the other part of the state. You can see this on a micro level where there's a lack of balance even in our own metro area, and it gets to the same thing as like, well, they live in Stafford and they have beautiful acreage and their big house over there, and then they're stereotyping an entire group of people in the third largest county like that, and they're using that as a narrative to stop from doing their job to have good government. And it's so bad and pervasive in this state that 2/3 of the state wants to become a different state. It's just not sustainable or healthy, right? It's not balanced. It's not reasonable. And so that's just, those comments didn't go unnoticed by me or unchecked in the moment. But I think you're right. Like, we need to be prepared to have a counter narrative to that. And to me, it's just about truly fairness and balance as we approach it.
Can I just add one other thing?
Yeah.
One other thought struck me. You know what they're really wealthy in, Portland or Multnomah County, is the number of legislators they have.
Yeah. Those districts are drawn just a certain way too, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know it's mathematical. It's based on population, so I'm not challenging the fact that the numbers are skewed or anything. I'm just saying that they have a wealth of legislators, right? That'd be the narrative. They have a wealth of legislators from their area, and we have a smaller amount. I mean, we could do some math. Unfortunately, gerrymandering makes it, there's duplication, but.
But I do like our Clackamas caucus. Like, I think the Clackamas caucus, and maybe even in some instances, we partner with the Washington caucus to maybe kind of where we find that common ground. But, we've seen like in tolling where we were able to partner with the Clackamas caucus to be effective in the legislature. They almost forced a floor vote on that tolling bill. They were losing control of that push for tolling, and large of that was us working with the Clackamas caucus. And there's 16 legislators, and you maybe add a couple from Marion County and Washington County, and all of a sudden, on some local issues, you might have some steam when you're dealing with the rest of Portland. But you're right, and they're also drawn in such a way too. how these districts are drawn matters, even though, of course, they're gonna have the bulk of them, but they're drawn in a way to retain that center of power, the way they have it, yeah.
Commissioner West, you want to continue?
I'm good. That's all I have to, I have to say my real comments for Thursday, but
All right.
this was obviously a hot button today.
Well, you were on a roll. I didn't want to
Yeah.
cut you off.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Shirley, you're up.
Okay, so Saturday night, I had the privilege of attending the Friends of Timberline dinner and auction, a silent auction at the lodge. It was a beautiful event, really nice people. I'm very impressed with the Friends of Timberline and the Timberline management on the great job they're doing in caring for, maintaining, and promoting tourism at Clackamas County's #1 tourism draw. That's the recreational opportunities on Mount Hood and Timberline Lodge. They're doing a great job. And the lodge has probably never looked better in its history than it does now. One of the things that we heard from was a history of the lodge. And going back to the 1940s, it was in decay. There's a lot of vice and corruption going on up there. And the current management for the last 50 years or so has done a wonderful job, and so it looks really good. The project for the idea for a $100 million investment in private money for the new gondola project from Summit up to a location just west of the Timberline Lodge with retail, restaurants, tourism information is going to really stimulate the tourism up there. And one of the big things is that it will reduce the problem of parking at the lodge. A lot of times that the road from 26 up to the lodge gets shut down because there's no more parking up there. This will take care of that and provide some 550 new parking spots down at Summit. Now, there's a couple of things for the county to be aware of, and that's one is we need to encourage, as we can, ODOT to relocate, when this project starts here next year, hopefully, relocate the ODOT restroom down there on Highway 26 to a new location, okay? That might also include some tourism assets from the county or the state there. The other thing, too, is we need to keep our eye on any plan for government camp for citing a new public restroom on the main street there in government camp. Those are some things that our staff should be aware of. But anyway, it was a very nice evening, and I'm very happy with the management up there and the potential for the development that's going to really do a lot for Clackamas County tourism. Thank you.
That's very exciting indeed.
It
Do
is.
they have a timeline for the gondola?
Yes, it's very ambitious, actually. They're hoping to get all their approval from the Forest Service here the coming next 6-8 months and have it completed by the end of 2028. Wow. Yeah, which is,
You know, for years and decades, it's all been talk, and now
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
doing something. That's great.
and it's going to be beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Saturday night, I was at the other end of the county at an event where, you might remember, retired Congressman Trey Gowdy spoke to the group. And I didn't realize how funny he is. You know, he's an attorney by trade, became a congressman, served 3 terms or 4 terms, and now is a private sector TV commentator and goes around giving speeches. But he was so succinct in his analysis of what's happening. I'm not going to repeat any of his things, because frankly, I don't remember them all. But he did talk about his children. He has a son and a daughter. And his son decided to major in philosophy and then become an attorney. So he went to law school, became an attorney, and graduated, and says, "Dad, I really don't like this work, it's hard." And Gowdy says, "Well, what do you expect? You majored in philosophy in college. Of course it's hard." And so it was really hysterical. And so he was talking about the productivity, and, we hear a lot about, I think our children are all doing fine and well. And then he has a daughter that also became an attorney, which I thought was interesting. So they had 3 attorneys in their family. I'm not sure what his wife does. I think she's equally involved in something, but it was just interesting to listen to somebody who you see on TV all the time, and he really personalized his life in general. And he says, well, his son isn't working. Yeah, you don't have to work because I'm working at 7 jobs now, so you can live in my basement type of thing. And it was fascinating, just really fascinating for me. Likewise, I've been traveling the county, meeting lots of different people, giving speeches. On Friday, there was an opening of the Clackamas Service Center on Southeast 80th in Clackamas County called Anna's Annex. And one of the reasons it got started, because this woman named Anna, who is now 100 years old, and she was honored there, in the 1970s hit the jackpot. She won $1,000 at bingo. And she took that money and she developed a clothes shop for free. She went in and she merchandised the clothes. She folded them in nice piles according to size and gender, and then she decorated the area and invited people in who couldn't afford to buy clothes and gave them away. And I thought, what a heart of a volunteer. And you go fast forward today, now the Clackamas Service Center called Anna's Annex. And the reason why it's an annex, because it started out in some little outbuilding on the back of the property. And so today, we voted to put $1.2 million into the construction of this building, or they would have never, ever been able to do it. And now we bring people in off the street who need a hot meal. There are showers, there are washer and dryers, there's an intake facility with case management where we can offer medical care, clothes, really taking a look at the homeless situation like we all have agreed to do. Take a look at causation, give them an opportunity, in my opinion, to remember what it's like to have a hot meal and a shower and not sleep on the street. And then beyond that, there's transitional housing. So it's very exciting, that program, and it was so well attended. It was very nice. Seeing no further business before this commission, we are adjourned.